episode 88 of the Impulso Podcast. And of course, those of you who are in East Asian culture, Chinese culture, will know that 88 is a very auspicious number. And for this special occasion, Sabrina decided to go off camera and she's standing behind the three cameras. And you also see that we have done a little bit of change to the setting. We have only one mic for three people. That's not because we are frugal, but because that I think there's a bit of operational improvement that we are doing, which you'll see the effect in the next episode. But anyway, so let's zoom into the topic today. Today I have two founders, and we're going to talk about the topic of carbon accounting and related issues. So first we have Sam, who is the CEO of CREX. And I'll let him explain what CREX is in a bit. You have Shaolin, who appeared in an earlier episode of the Impulso Podcast, Chewing Glass. And of course, that explains the life as a founder. But anyway, today we're talking about carbon accounting. So Sam, why don't you give you an introduction about yourself and what you do and why CREX, not PREX?
I'll talk about CREX first. Right?
Okay.
So essentially CREX is, you can think of us as a climate tech startup, right? But we are essentially a team of sustainability experts. So we cover topics or expert areas like carbon accounting, all the way to carbon reduction, net zero, right? Of course, that also covers sustainability. It covers disclosure standards like the IFRS, S1, S2 standards, and among other things. But one of the very interesting things that we do is this. The world talks a lot about climate change, right? And what organizations need to do is adopt climate action. The adoption is the problem. And this is what we do. Yeah. So, solving climate change is a scientific problem, but the adoption of climate action is an adoption problem. And so you need expertise, you need methodologies coming in, you need management skills, consulting skills, and a whole data platform. And this is what CREX does.
Okay, I didn't ask the half of what you were saying. That's why I brought Shaolin, who is... you introduce yourself.
Hey, hello. This is Shaolin. I'm the co-founder and CTO of NextBillion.ai. So NextBillion.ai is a company in the logistics industry. So we help logistics company to optimize their day-to-day operation. So we try to minimize, for example, the total amount of distance that they need to travel to complete a certain amount of orders, which links us to the environment protection. So we try to minimize the waste because we see so many of them. Based on traffic, you should choose a more optimized route. And based on all your orders, we help you to decide what is the best way to manage all the work you need to do. So that's link me to Sam.
So essentially, you guys are doing something which serves the same purpose, right? Making the organizations more efficient and reduce carbon footprint along the way? Or how do you see these two objectives align? Because we speak to lots of people give us like a lot of, vision about carbon accounting, but still I feel that lots of people understand it as is an extra step they need to take, which is a burden. And from what you guys have explained before this show, that it actually helps organizations become more efficient. How do you explain that in a clear and crystal way?
So the first thing, when I talk to organizations, the first thing I do is tell them, sustainability, right? Climate action has to go hand in hand with your business. It has to align with your business. It has to make sense, right? So if it doesn't, then you really have to relook your entire priorities. Who are your stakeholders and all of that, right? And once that clicks, and so you say it has to make sense, it has to make business sense, and it has to align. Show me how. Then we say, okay, as part of reducing carbon footprint, I could make your organization a lot more efficient. Routing is definitely one way. A lot of companies don't realize that, okay, just because you have a lot of delivery orders and all, you can actually dispatch differently, taking different routes, different vehicles, different tonnage, different load factor. There are many ways to do this. And the truth be told is that there's so much science behind optimization, process optimization in all the different fields, mechanical, electrical, and all that, that most companies have not fully, I would say, exploited. And their working crew normally knows this. They know they can go an extra mile and get the optimization, but they could never get that mandate from the management, or they could never get the message right. So that's one of the things we come in. We say, okay, you can get cost savings, you can get better efficiency, you can get better customer service. At the same time, you now align with your sustainability goals that your stakeholders have been driving you, toward, and all of that has to click. Yeah.
How do you do that?
Give an example, right?
Example, yeah.
Okay, so
Sure, feel free to challenge you.
Oh, totally. Yeah. There are two parts. There is the strategy part and there's the execution part.
Okay.
Okay. I'll start with the strategy, right? First question is I ask management will be, what are your top 5 customers? What do they care? And if one of your top 5 customers have already committed to, say, Science-Based Target Initiative, which is the UN gold standard for reducing carbon emissions, right? Okay. If they care, you should care because they are your customers. Next, who are your top 5 competitors? And what do they care? If they do care, you should care because you're competing, right? If you are the number 2, you want to get to number 1. Or if you're number 1, you're trying to maintain as number 1, you should care. The next thing is which are the top 5 regions that you operate in? Who are the regulators and what do they care? So now you look at that whole landscape and say, okay, all right, now that you know what everyone cares, you ask yourself inward, what do you care? Okay. And you also ask your staff, right? You ask your shareholders, you ask your suppliers, you ask your partners, what do you care? Right? And then you put the whole landscape together, you put the whole, it's like a cognitive kind of view, right? The world view, right? And figure out, okay, this is what the world wants. You look at yourself, what am I good at? What can I be paid for? Right? And what I love to do. Okay? And you know, a little bit like an ikigai, right? And you put all that together and say, okay, should I redefine my mission so that my customers could resonate with what I do in my business at the same time they feel good? Are my customers looking for peace of mind? Or are my customers looking to comply? Or my customers looking to be more efficient? What is it, right? Right. And with most companies that are looking to financially be more efficient, right? Have cost savings and everything, have the best service possible and all of that. And I think that is the strategy part. Right. Most companies, when we talk about decarbonization sustainability strategy, they say, oh, okay, we set a goal 2030, we halve our emissions, 2050, we're done zero. And that's my strategy. That's not a strategy, that's a target. A target and a strategy is 2 different things, right?
So the target is usually set by what?
That's the thing. Most people just take the default target set by SBTI. SBTI has a target, science-based target. That's the organization. The actual standard, or so to speak, is called the Science-Based Target Initiative.
Okay.
They now have a net zero standard. Okay. That's even more curated, defined, well-defined. So basically, it says by 2030, you should reduce your emissions by 45%. Okay. And by 2050, you should go to zero. That's just the target. That's like the model answer, right?
Yeah.
And then under the Paris Agreement, 1.5 degrees, no more than 1.5 degrees increase. Most companies take that as strategy.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, fine. You want to align with SBTI?
Yeah.
No problem.
Yeah.
But that's just the target. The strategy is how you get there, right? And that's where they sometimes try their best. Some buy carbon offsets and then say, okay, I'm now carbon neutral. And you have regulators and you have NGOs coming in and say, no, you're not. So they get caught. What do you mean we're not? The forest you just bought a lot of credits for, or a lot of offsets just burn up. So now all the carbon that you so-called bought or sequestered has gone back to the air. What are you going to do about it? Sustainability is not my core business, and that's when they get caught. How can you say I don't blame them? Right, because it's so new, right? Okay, my stakeholders are chasing me to be sustainable, so let me do something. They try their best, right? And in fact, they pay money for it. And good intentions, but wasn't well strategized and backfired. So this is the strategy bit. Right.
We spoke with a very large company last year, and now they have Asian-based company. They have very large sustainability team, and they told us very frankly, okay, 2 years ago we're very simple business people, right? We create value for our customers.
Yes.
And 2 years ago, nobody asked us for sustainability, but 2 years later, and what we do realize is that, of course, the regulators and care about that a lot of the markets they're operating in, and the customers start to care a lot as well. And of course, there's the media and stuff. So they said, oh, fine. So we have to do it, and we believe that it's the right thing. And if everyone wants it, so we'll do it. Of course, the question becomes, what is the next? How to do it?
How do I get there? How do I do it without backfiring? The simple answer to that is actually quite straightforward. Use science-based methods and back it with data. Is what all tech people love.
Yeah.
Back it with data. Show your progression. Show the trend, right? You can model it in using any form of algorithm, heuristics, or statistical methods, right? Right? And then I think, okay, my assumption was based on the data, based on the trend. You can fault me for using the wrong algorithm, but you cannot fault me for trying. In that case, right? So that's the straightforward answer. And also the other way is looking at it from a mentality perspective. For example, a real estate company focuses a lot on safety. Focusing on safety increases costs, cost of construction.
Yeah.
So why do they do it? Because condominium buyers don't love the fact that during the construction of the condo, someone died on site. It's bad for
Especially
business.
Asia, I guess.
Especially Asians, right?
Yeah.
It's bad for business, bad for reputation. So be it reputation, be it operational excellence, be it cost savings, be it anything, right? There's usually a good, how should I say, a good amount of alignment with the business that will help the business grow better. There is this idea that you cannot grow your business and be sustainable. No, that is not possible because you haven't aligned your business with sustainability. Once you align properly, know your strengths and weaknesses, right? Strategize correctly, right? And ask yourself, which are the consumers? Who are the customers and the stakeholders am I resonating with? And then one example for e-commerce, for example, and this is to do with something with logistics as well. There was this so-called experiment done. Most people assume the consumers would love the deliveries to be done a lot earlier. And then give them one more eco-friendly option. The delivery will reach you with some delay. It will come later. And guess what? Some customers actually went for that. And knowing that same price.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there's a normal price. There's a normal price, and then there's the fast one, which is way more expensive, right?
Yeah.
So the normal and the delayed is the same price. They went for the delayed one. Because if I don't need it right now, I don't need it within a week. Come 8 days to 12 days, maybe 20 days. I don't mind if it's more eco-friendly option because the company could pack more in each dispatch, right? So they save more, right? And yeah, that's the thing. Sometimes it's counterintuitive, right? And you just have to know your customers better, know your stakeholders better. And then imagine this. You have this service and you provide it to them. What is the message you're telling them? What's the narrative? You tell them that, hey, I have the options. I have thought it through. Okay, but if you truly need an urgent dispatch in 3 days, by all means, same day delivery, by all means. But I have the option, 8 to 20 days, which is the eco-friendly option. So consumers, you told me you wanted a company that is a lot more responsible. I have the options. Show me the trend. Show me data, right?
So you talked about algorithm, right? So in our company, the main product is actually an algorithm that helps the logistic platforms to be able to reduce the total amount of distance or time that their trucks have to drive to deliver the same amount of orders. So because how we compete is very clear. So usually the customer will share a bunch of historical data with us to see how our algorithm will perform. If we are performing than what they already have today, then it's a very easy decision for them to make. Now I started to hear more ask from them is to say, help us to decide, for example, how many you have contribute to the and then we don't know how to do that. We can tell you the total amount of distances reduce, no need to drive anymore, but I don't know how to calculate. So do you have the algorithm? So what will be the algorithm?
Right.
So that translate is the carbon accounting we're talking about.
Correct. That's carbon accounting. Right. That is one way to do carbon accounting.
Yeah.
So for example, the distance is an obvious one. The further you travel, right, the more carbon emissions, right? Then we also all assume diesel at some point, right? Not electricity, right? So that's one. Second, what kind of vehicle we're looking at, right? 6-wheeler, 4-wheeler, how many tons? 3 ton, 5 ton, 8 ton, or 7 ton. So that is another factor. Next question, is your batch in a full load, half load, or is it empty truck? Okay, this empty truck is not what a customer would normally ask for, but when we do carbon accounting, sometimes we consider it empty trucks. So we ask our customer, what are the chances that your truck returns empty? Because that whole carbon emission is totally wasted. So-called wasted, right? It is not worth anything, right? Because there's no so-called production value. If you delivered a whole 5 ton of goods with a 7 ton truck, that's fine, right? So actually, those are some of the ways to get the, how should I say, get the emission calculated. Because if we use distance only, then basically the shortest route, the least amount of fuel is the way to go.
Yeah.
Right? The vehicle type, the load factor, and then of course the slope as well adds the complexity.
Yeah, it sounds like we should add these as a separate metric.
It's not very far off from what you're doing. Not very far off at all. Like I said, a lot of the reduction methods are efficiency methods. Yeah. And then ultimately, the complex one that you may not cover is when my clients say, hey, you know what? I want to go EV, right? Forklifts or delivery trucks. I want to go full EV. I said, no, please don't do that. Because your entire fleet, when did you buy all these trucks? And when do you even own the truck? If your truck is 60% very new, less than 5 years, okay, please continue to use them. Use routing methods to optimize your trucks, your routes, your fleet, right? The 40% is really old. Great, replace them. And you do a phase by phase. You don't, because the thing is this: if you have, say, half your fleet or more than half your fleet is really new, what are you going to do? You're going to scrap them or you're going to sell them? If you're going to sell them, someone's going to burn diesel with those machines, with those cars, with those trucks.
To be used anyway, and maybe not as efficient.
Exactly. So if you look at the whole life cycle, and then say, okay, probably this is the plan, right? So this is where we help them build the strategy, right? Forklift is actually the number one thing they shift us. Because forklift is not a very long distance, right? But it's a daily use in the warehousing, daily use. So you say, okay, I want to go from diesel to EV, right? And I know that the forklift is within the warehouse. So the risk of out of battery, right? Out of electricity is very low, right? Although that's a little bit of a myth, because if you look into routing and all, once you know your travel patterns, you can incorporate the charging within the travel pattern. Yeah. So the life cycle of the vehicle is probably something that we can collaborate on, right? And then the charging as well, something that we can collaborate on.
But the life cycle of the vehicle, if you sell it to someone else, you increase, of course, the total carbon footprint. If you look at that, the vehicle per se, it doesn't change. But for you as an organization per se, will change, right? Because once you sell it away, it's no longer your responsibility, and it doesn't get into the hottest.
That was where initially a lot of the organization try to get away from like responsibility wise. Okay, it's no longer my coal-fired power plant.
Yeah,
because I sold it to someone else.
I'll sell the assets to someone else.
Right? But someone is still burning. So you move it from your scope 1, your direct emission, to a scope 3 emission because you sold like a product to someone else. Someone else is using your product right now and they're still burning. Right? So in carbon accounting, there's a concept called scope 3.
Yeah.
And once you sold something to someone else, technically you're responsible for influencing, right? The construction of the vehicle, in this case, is what we call embodied carbon, right? That doesn't change whether I own it or you own it, right? Now, very interesting thing about vehicles. If I'm like an antique car collector, I'm actually saving the environment because I bought the car. I'm not driving. Interesting, yeah?
Okay.
The car has been on the road for 10, 20 years. Someone drove it for 10, 20 years. And I'm buying it right now. I'm putting it in my garage. I'm maintaining it well, but I'm not quite driving it. Great. Why not? There's nothing wrong with that.
But then you encourage the manufacturer to produce even more cars because someone is buying it.
Correct. So I agree with you. So that problem has to be tackled with regulations. So the regulatory will come in to say, if you manufacture more fossil fuel or combustion cars, we're going to tax you more, right? So it's two different sides of the problem. But you're right. If the regulators don't step in, it will actually encourage the manufacturers to do more of that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I have another question that go back to the algorithm thing because so when we are helping, for example, to optimize truck routes, another factor we are always facing is that a lot of truck drivers, they are trying to fight with their employer, right? The employer sometimes try to track their behavior. They try to anti-track. They use some device to silence the GPS device so that they can do something without the control. So I imagine in this space, sometimes it will be hard for you to really get the real ground truth.
And also actually about that, the fuel consumption thing, I think I've been in the e-commerce space long enough and know lots of logistic operators, and many of them will tell you that, look, we know that certain percentage of the fuel that adds my bill doesn't get consumed by my drivers. It gets sold to third party.
Yes.
And for a long time, I either did my calculation or learned my lesson. So to turn a blind eye on this, as long as it doesn't go to a certain threshold. Yes. And when that kind of situation, I think it's in a way extension to what Shaolin just mentioned. When that happens, and it naturally makes the things a little bit extra blurry. Or if something to add to this point?
To us, it's a technology thing. So we, for example, if you can silence one of my GPS device, I install 2. Yeah, so you silence the 2, we install 3. The third one will be hidden deeply.
Sure.
So we are doing this kind of technology fight.
I agree with that as well. Remember when I started off, I say this is an adoption problem. Includes change management, friction, and organization behavior. I haven't seen any large fleet except for DHL and UPS type of professional fleets, right? But I'm talking about like a self-delivery or home fleet, where the drivers follow the instructions to the T. I've never seen it before. because they may take a different route because they want to go for a coffee break. All the human reasons kicks in, right? In the solving the adoption problem, you have to consider some of this, and you may have to pick your battles and say, okay, I'm not going to solve this one because I'm going to make sure that if I let the guy take the coffee break, okay, yes, there are emissions, but then I could get him to adopt something else, which will lower even more emissions. And I pick my battles. That's one thing. The second thing is technology, right? Such I would use ODB to install the tracker into the truck straight away, right? I would use issue company fleet cards. So they top up the if you were using the fleet card, so I can know how much to top up and how many liters to top up, and then using the phone to track. So you got multiple data points, right? Knowing that it's not foolproof. Knowing it's still not foolproof. In fact, one example with one of the clients we had was that exactly that example you talked about, which is because we suddenly started tracking. And we talk about tracking where we try to collect more data points in a area that was never picked up before. So they may have a starting and the ending, right?
Yeah.
So I said, okay, we like to track here. So we add one more. And then we found that someone was selling something.
We add one more. What if
Measure. Yeah.
Okay.
So from point A, point B, point A, point B, at some point we did one more measurement. Then realized that it's always at this route that it will burn more fuel. So it became obvious, right?
Yeah.
It became obvious. And then that's where we stopped. We said, okay, fine. We're showing you the numbers, we're showing you the efficiency, we're showing you the carbon emissions. And we're not like investigators and all. So we stop there, but we show the management, okay, you can decide what you want to do. And in that case, they did. And yeah, they found that the staff was doing something it wasn't supposed to be doing.
So what did they do afterwards?
I don't know. But they changed the process though.
I think once they know exactly what the problem is, whether they decide to do it, whether they decide not to do it, whether they decide to
correct
to use this as a bargaining power or something else, that becomes a business decision. At least then they're making informed decision.
Yes.
I remember that a friend of mine used to be the chief information officer of one of the largest petrol companies in Latin America, not name which country. And he had this situation that systematically people are stealing oil from the network. And he told me that how complex the thing was, right? In certain places, okay, they found it. They decided, okay, we need to go and investigate to solve the problem, right? Certain places, they said, okay, our company security guards and the company executive find it too dangerous. So we employ the police to help us do that. It's their own company that can do that. And there's other places, the police said, no, we're not going, it's too dangerous. And they asked for the federal army to go there. And he said there was a specific the gas station somewhere. The federal army said no, it's too dangerous for us. Whoa! So that how to solve the complexities of the supply chain. In certain places, you have all these issues which not pure algorithm, pure efficiency can solve. But at least it makes you more informed so that you can decide what to do about it.
Exactly. Most management are not looking for straightforward solutions. They want visibility. They want data, right? That's the first step, right? The first step to any form of data transformation or digital transformation. And then they can ask themselves, what's the risk? Then you go back one step more, right? One step higher. Risk management, right?
Yeah.
Okay, it's a black box because I cannot measure for some reason. I cannot mitigate. The risk is still there. Can I contain it? What do I do? Is this worth the business? Right? You start looking at that and then you say, okay, maybe it's not worth the business.
Yeah.
What happened?
We are actually in an awkward position. So because a lot of the time, so for example, somebody try to destroy those technology, destroy your tracker, fake their GPS, right? And then they will blame us. Because when their boss try to blame them, they blame us because we provide the technology. They say it's not us to make something, it's their product is not working. So a lot of the time, it's very hard for us to defend ourselves to prove that it's actually a good technology. So as you said, we need to add more data points to support our conclusion.
So maybe add some paint to your, like a partial paint to a device. If someone destroyed that, it's the paint that this person will be stained.
The idea is to fully embrace adoption issues, right? Friction, human behavior, change management issues, and technology is one way to do that. And this is where I think as a company is very interesting. Because a lot of the deep tech companies, when we talk about decarbonization, they provide solutions, right? And what Shaolin has mentioned, you provide a solution, and if the organization, not the management, if the organization rejects it because there's some form of friction, you now have to play the defensive role, right?
Yeah.
Whereas in company accounting or in the way that we do things, we come in as a consultant. Because our platform works like it's used by consultants. So we also come in as consultants. So a lot of times we do what we call the baseline assessment, which is sometimes like an audit. So it helps because you then go bottom up and top bottom, because on top bottom you go audit mode and say, okay, show me this. Can I sit down with you in the truck for one day? And you do stuff like that, and you ask the management, what are your goals? What do you think was the ideal outcome? And then you look at what's on the ground, what are the records and everything. And we talk to IT and operations and all. And then so we sometimes can provide insights to solution providers and say, okay, this is how we can connect together. So let's use proxy metrics. If you cannot measure directly, you can use proxy metrics and stuff like that. Yeah, it's very interesting because I studied computer science because I want to avoid all the human-related problems that I realized. To adopt technology, we have to understand humans, which is quite interesting. So a lot of the issues that I try to solve for organization in the adoption problem is understanding humans, understanding organization behaviors and setting goals and stuff like that. And we have to agree that the fact the working level, the crew may not resonate with the management goals. A lot of time, the CEO has a vision, right? And he tells everyone, from today onwards, we're going to do this. The crew will be like, okay, what does it have to do with me? How do I gain from this? And stuff like that. You're changing my behavior. So there's friction, there's change management issues, right? Change resistance. So that has to be communicated to the management, to the CEO as well. Say, okay, it's not only about communicating your vision better. You have to show why, apart from rallying, why the team has to follow you, and then get the team to be with you on the same ship, go with the same way. What are the incentives? What are the penalties if there's any required? Because the company will be penalized by regulators, for example, carbon tax coming in and stuff like that. Yeah, so explain all of that properly and then go through a proper change management if need be. And then things will get better. It's not perfect, but it'll get better. It'll get better. Especially in this case, for example, if there is a serious issue and it's a core function of the business to deliver goods and they just cannot optimize that part and they feel the burn, they feel the pain is too much for them, then we actually would recommend an alternative options, outsourcing a little bit of that, stuff like that. So there are companies that I know use 3 fleets, 2 outsource, 1 internal. Yeah, and then they compare, right? And then you give incentives to the internal team. If you can match those guys, right? Then first of all, I don't have to pay the outsourcing company. A lot of those money can be saved and I pay you guys. So that's how we work out so efficiencies and cost savings is not just deepening the pockets of the company and potential shareholders. This is also something to do with, it goes beyond sustainability, but it's the human factor. So the key question to management is that, how much do you want this?
So in that way, it's interesting that if you're forced by whether your customers, whether somebody on the value chain, up the value chain, or the regulators for you to actually be, I don't know, have some kind of carbon accounting, it's opportunity for you to leverage this to push for some internal audit in a way.
Yeah, yes. And then, of course, we don't position as an audit. We call it baseline assessment. And some companies are okay with it.
Okay.
Some companies say, no, we think you're good. So for whatever reason, we'll do whatever they're comfortable with. But we highly recommend they do it. Because like I said before, good intentions, bad execution, right? So sometimes you want to reverse that before you get caught. But again, sustainability is not really we should never use the fear, uncertainty, doubt in getting the adoption, right? I understand a lot of my peers are going in with the idea that, oh, if you don't do this, the regulators will chase after you. You have to comply at some point and you'll be taxed and Yes, if you do that, the companies will comply and they will stop the compliance. The compliance requirement is just disclosure. No improvement required. It's just disclosure at the moment. Okay. So I don't think we want that. We want company to think properly and don't rush into it. Okay, if I want to do this and I want this outcome, I think we need a 3-year head start. Okay. First 3 years, we don't expect much, but eventually we'll reap the rewards, say on the 5th year, for example, right? I want to do this correctly, right? So they don't feel forced to do it. So, and this is the same as the problem we talked about at the working level as well. Management working level, they're actually the same. So if the working level is part of the solution, they tend to adopt it because they were involved in the solutioning part in the process, right? It wasn't some executive who never drove a truck and said, today onwards you have to do this. That's tough. right? That's tough to you get a bit of resistance, right? So it is really finding a narrative internally, externally, right? Internally, it could be, hey, our competitors are doing this. They have been grabbing all these contracts that we wanted.
But isn't that a fear?
Competitiveness, not fear.
Okay.
Yeah, competitiveness. Yeah. I see what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. I was recently reading a book called How to Win an Information
Mm.
War, and it talks about the British government's propaganda effort during
Yeah.
the war. And it was very interesting that initially they were doing the radio to the enemy side, try to rally their people to not support their government, which I think today is very relevant looking at the world we're
It
in
is.
now. But the thing is that they said they used effort to try to get people to rally to a cause. Doesn't work. They try to instill fear about people. Doesn't work.
Mm.
And eventually, something will call the mechanic saying that, hey, we figure out what these people want to do, which is for their human nature,
Yeah.
and we justify this for them.
Oh, I see.
We justify for them because that's much easier to match their behavior compared to you talk about something which is not in their nature.
Yep.
Mm.
Yep. Yeah. I think a lot of it is if you want change, you need to understand human behavior.
Mm.
Because if it's nothing to do with humans and a piece of software, we know it's easy, right? Upgrading a piece of software is easy. You don't need human intervention. That's easy, right? But changing organization behavior, structures, and goals and everything, you have to fully understand what the company is, the people within the organization, what's their DNA.
Mm.
And if you ask any CEO, most of the time they will say, yep, I think I know my people. I think the DNA we have is 90% what we want. There's 10% more to go. There's always a little delta, right?
Mm.
And then you ask yourself, okay, since you have this new goal, new direction, want to be more sustainable as part of your business, right? Okay, so we need to steer your people towards that. And then therefore you now have the mission to understand the people now. You have to revisit who they are, understanding what their current DNA is, and then figure out what's their ideals. Yeah.
When you talk about human nature, right?
Mm.
So, for example, take myself. When we finish this, I go back to my home. I hope my room temperature should be the best that as I want. It's supposed to be something like 21 centigrade, which means I need to either keep my air conditioner running all day. So that's my human nature.
Yep.
So take into account the price of the electricity in Singapore. So usually I turn them off.
Yep.
That's also my human nature. In this the carbon accounting industry, so how human nature, is it helping or not helping?
Yeah, as with all things, sometimes the different requirements, different goals conflict with each other, and then you don't get a solution. Sometimes they just look really challenging, but there is a solution. The three solutions to this example, which is a very common issue that I also face, most of us face. The first thing that we can't do too much is the insulation. We can't tell HDB to insulate the walls better. Okay, so that's out of our, at least for now, out of our reach. The second one is how we control the HVAC side, which is the heating, cooling portion of it. Yes, we want to save money. Okay, we want the room to be cool, right? So we want to be carbon efficient. We want to be cost efficient. That's the goal, which is great because you're not saying I want my room. You're not setting a goal to say I want to turn on my aircon for X number of hours. So the first step is to move away from those goals and go for something very tangible and measurable. I want to be cool. I want to save money. And then you say, okay, understand that if this was a factory, right? Okay, I can use the same example in a residential to find out why is your home heating up. Humidity. So humidity is to do with amount of water, moisture in the air, right? So if I were you, I would set the aircon at about 27 degrees before the sun is fully out. So I regulate my temperature at about 27 degrees. Once it hits 27 degrees, I switch to dry mode. I remove all the humidity from the room. And therefore, I can keep the aircon on as long as I can without the compressor going to overdrive. Because you set it to 24 degrees, 25 degrees, right? Especially when you're back in the home, it's all hot now. It's 31 degrees, 22 degrees, right? Indoor, right? And then you have to push it down to 22, 24 degrees, right?
To
Correct. Compensate, right?
Compensate,
Yeah. You kind of have to overcompensate for half an hour, 1 hour, right?
Yeah.
And then the compressor goes into overdrive. But if you say 27 degrees, the closer you are to the outdoor temperature, right, the less the compressor has to work. That's the first point. The second point is how much does it have to work to maintain the degrees, right? That temperature, right? So one of the example, or in fact, a guide I give to my friends is that set it 27 before like 12 o'clock, before like maybe 10:30, 11, it's fine. You know? Once you feel that the room is quite where you like it to be, switch it to a dry mode. And then if you don't want the fan to run too hard, put it to 1, right? But just be careful that dry mode with fan set to number 1 it will condense it within the pipes. So you have to maintain it well. Okay, but that aside, okay, you can maintain a very cooling place for hours and hours in a day. And then at some point, usually by 5 p.m., 6 p.m., I say, hey, you know what? We'll turn off the AC. And it will last for a couple more hours. It's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's interesting. That looks at the household level, but I think at the industrial level, there must be lots of these use cases.
Yes, examples. Yes.
You can explore and say that, okay, here I can actually drive more efficiency in my industrial setting.
Correct. It is similar to this, right? Similar to this, how pipes are designed, where do you lose your heat, where do you lose your electricity, right? So if it's heat and all, you're looking at thermodynamics, right? If it's electricity, you look at wiring, you look at electricity loss, and then we look into mechanical. Like a machine has a data sheet that has a certain operating parameters. Right? For example, it will vibrate with a certain amount of decibel sounds. If it spikes, if it operates in a very odd manner, out of its operating range all the time, or is at 100%, 80% capacity all the time, when you know the production unit is at 20% rate, something's wrong, right? So you need that few pieces of data. You need to know how the operating parameters. You need to have the sensor on the machinery. You need to know how much you're producing. Right? It's all data. Once you have that, you draw the graph, the anomaly is very clear. And then we don't even need to come up with solutions. We can go to the ground crew and say, you know what, we saw this, right? And most of the time, the chief engineer, the experts on the ground say, yeah, if that's the case, that means there was an inefficiency somewhere, right? And either they will tune something or they will call in the equipment manufacturer who would have a solution for that. The end result, the outcome is with the data, we allow the working crew or the management to make decisions, and then they optimize the process, optimize the environment, and they lower emissions. But when we present to the management, say all the cost savings.
So basically, all the technologies there, and what you need to do is basically get people to be willing to adopt, and as well as how to translate, as Shaolin said, all these different parameters into something more tangible and comparable.
So there are very few, how should I say, carbon reduction methods that, or should I say, there are very few, carbon reduction methods that is not involving some form of change process or efficiency, right? I can list out all the reduction methods, right? The first one is obvious. The first one is change of energy source, change to renewable transition. That's the big one, right? But you may not have that option on hand because your grid electricity may not provide that to you. And the next thing you want to do is change your material, right? A more eco-friendly material, a more sustainable material like aluminum is a very good example, right? Versus plastic, right? Aluminum is definitely way more recyclable at 90%, right? Versus plastic. Plastic, because collection is a problem. Now,
sorry, how does glass fit into this picture?
Oh, glass. If you use returnable or reusable glass and you have a very high reusable rate, the industrial number that was given to me was about 25 times. If you reuse glass at 25 times, you can't break even. But on the ground, we have seen cases that it goes up to 80. So pretty good ROI, yeah. So now each of this, any of your audience would straight away say, oh, there are trade-offs. Yes, and that's what we do. Aluminum, you have to bear the smelting process of the rolling process, the mining process of aluminum first time, right? Then you melt it again for a second time, right? Plastic is a lot lighter to transport, right? Goods, right? But collection is a problem. Therefore, recycling is a problem, right? The mix of plastics, which is a very common thing because of the nature of plastics, right? It makes it harder to recycle. Another problem, right? Glass, nearly indestructible. If you know how to design it, you know how to take care of it, right? But it's heavier, right, to transport, right? So you ask yourself, what's the distance? Who am I transporting to? What's the frequency? What kind of goods am I holding? You use the right tools for the right job. Right? So that's
What kind of glass can reuse 80 times?
Coca-Cola, like a soda bottle, you'll be very surprised when the whole industry moved from glass to PET bottles, right?
Yeah, plastic, right?
Plastic, yes, PET, right? The people who designing glass bottles and the science of it, the shape of it, where does the contour happen, which part of the contour should be thicker and stuff like that. But that's coming back again because people are now looking at glass and said, okay, you know what? Glass is easy to recycle because once I collect it, when I'm done 80 times, I crush it, melt it, I put it back, it's glass again, especially if it's a non-colored glass, right? Clear glass. So now it's into the design. Because if I know how to design the contour and how to design the bottle such a way that the parts that will knock together is hardened and minimal, I can reuse the glass as long as I can. Yeah, so that's one good example. And another example is a more residential home example. If you go to supermarkets, most of the food today is packaged using some form of plastic. Aluminum film plastic, right? Or just plastic.
Mm.
Okay. The reason for that is because light and it extends shelf life, especially plastic with aluminum film. But it's nearly, at this point, in this part of the world, very hard to recycle because it's hard to split that material back into its virgin form, right? Yeah. One of the companies, or Australian companies have done, Scoop has done, is that they sell you food and everything in a container. You go there, you take a craft paper kind of a bag, and then you just scoop up whatever you want, and the way you buy. Now that bag doesn't last very long, and they tell you that. But if you want it to last longer, you buy a jar from them, and that jar it lasts forever, right? So Watsons has the same idea now. You buy the bottles, and then you pump your shampoo. So going back to the old days, in one generation, we're doing a 180 degrees U-turn back to the old ways of doing things. This is just way more sustainable.
And across the region, we also see that there's a very different consumption power of different consumers. So
it is true.
So obviously, plastic works in certain places because if you just say that it's a forever island in Indonesia, if you just order glass and recycling everything, it just doesn't make sense. But on the other hand, I realized when in Singapore, when I see the glass bottles, I rarely see those worn-out glass bottles. But in Bangkok, I see that a lot, right?
Yes.
So you go to a hotel, they give you the water that the glass has been used for multiple times.
Yeah.
You buy the bottled water from outside, you will see it's obviously recycled glass because the rim you have a sign of when.
In Singapore, we probably, I'm not sure, not really sure. Singapore we probably use what we call a single-use glass, which means it's designed to buy, consume, and throw, which is quite a waste, right? So we're having glass bottles instead of having glass bottles because the collection is a problem. The collection is recycling is a problem. So you need a whole infrastructure, right? So that adoption problem is the same as EV. You need some form of infra before you can adopt. So you need a lot of planning. You need to know why you're doing this, right? And so where does reusable glass bottles, say, for example, soda, right? Soda drinks come into play. If I deliver to a restaurant, I make 5 trips, 6 trips, 10 trips a week. I can do that. The restaurant owner said, yeah, if I get a refund, 5 cents per bottle, I will do this. I will collect for you. Actually, beer bottles is very common, right?
Yeah.
So that's already there. But you're right. There are use cases where plastics are better, right? So the approach to plastics, there's only 2 problems, to be honest. The first problem with plastic is the microplastics and the methane if you put into a landfill, right? So you have to properly process your waste. Right, so it's about waste management, about recycling, right? The challenge to that is the product must be designed to be recyclable, right? If it's designed not to be recyclable, it's tough luck, right? The second problem with plastic, and this is more of my personal opinion, just my personal opinion, is that plastic is a petrochemical byproduct. Every kilogram of virgin plastic you use means something was extracted from the ground, from crude oil, which means indirectly, I would assume that the price of plastic indirectly subsidizes crude oil. Oh, not crude oil, diesel, petrol. If you remove that from the equation, I think petrol and diesel will go a little bit, which will make the adoption to solar or other renewable energy a lot more fairer, right? Level the playing field a little bit. So that's the second problem with plastic. Now, if I could probably collect the plastic, if I could recycle the plastic, right? Is plastic good material? Yes. It's actually a very good material. Plastic is useful for a lot of things. It's very light, it's very malleable, you can shape it, you can recycle it, stuff like that. So it's really how we design the products and how we recycle the plastics, how we manage that, how the process, which not many companies are very good at, and the society as a whole, not very good at. This is not done by any independent statistics, it's actually done by beverage factories or manufacturers, so to speak. Actually, not even that, it's actually their suppliers. Apparently, if anyone were to see or use a aluminum can, the consumer instinct is to recycle it. But if they use a plastic bottle, they throw it. No one knows why. I don't know why.
But the plastic is actually recyclable.
Yes. So consumer behavior has this, needs to be educated, we need to push them towards. Apparently, the collection rate for aluminum cans is higher.
Because people know it can be recycled.
Maybe. Or they feel it's expensive, so I better recycle. It's an important resource, right? Whereas I think, I don't know. Actually, I don't know why. But that's one of the things insights I got, right? This is not published by any big statistical folks and stuff like that, because I'm not quite sure if anyone has done this study. But this is coming from suppliers. And I felt this is a very interesting insight. Because it's nothing to do with the recyclability of the material. It's just consumer behavior.
I think when I was a kid, a lot of recyclers near my neighborhood, they will try to collect this.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, but they don't accept
Plastic.
things like
Yeah.
plastic, right?
Yes.
So that's when I was educated.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Is that something to do with the cost, right? If someone collects this and sell,
At the moment, 20, 30 years ago, we try to recycle everything. We try to get every single cent.
That's true.
We try to everything that can be refunded, we will try to push it. Every single piece of papers, all of this. Some of the glass, like a bottle of beer.
when you were a kid, okay.
Yeah. Never plastic. So today for me it's also I learned this plastic now can
Right now you connect the dots, right? It's like, there must be something about aluminum or metal or glass.
But then you see that okay, even for Shaolin, who presumably is very informed, he doesn't even know that much about plastic. I mean, I didn't know that either. So I'm not sure. So when I look at plastic, I'm not sure where they came
I'm not sure. I want to read up more on this. If there's any reports, I want to learn more if to validate or what I've read up to be sure. But those are the stuff that we really need to know. Consumer behavior, right? If the consumer behavior does not align with the facts, with the science, we need to educate. We need to encourage. We need to incentivize. We need to do whatever it takes. Again, back to the organization that has a sustainability at its core. How much do you want this? The more you want, the more you want this, the more you need to educate your stakeholders, your customers.
Yeah, but then again, so we mentioned at the very beginning that okay, how much your suppliers want, how much your customers want, how much what do the regulators want, and all the stakeholders, and we talk about education is needed. I mean, then as long as you have this transparency, you can then give it up to say that okay, the education cost, suppliers should bear this, customers should bear this cost, and manufacturers bear this cost, and the government should maybe bear this cost.
Yes. So you're right. Once you know what your stakeholders care and where they are in terms of knowledge, and then the delta is what we call primers. As an organization, if I want to educate the different stakeholders require different primers. Right? Primer is like really like a crash course, right? All right. Why does it matter to you? What are the facts and what you can do about it and stuff like that? Why does it affect the environment or whatever, right? Yeah. So you go with a primer. And sometimes it is true. You have to prime your regulators. The number one way to prime regulators is to share data. They can't make policies if there's no data. Simple, right? How can they put an article passed by parliament or any government in the world to say that you must do this if they don't have the data to show that it can be done? They have to be in ways, right? We're not telling them what to do. We're just showing them data. So I think that's even regulators. Yeah.
I think sometimes it's hard for them to actually have the data. I remember a couple of years ago when the bicycle sharing is very popular in China, right? The government tried to understand how many of them on the street. And the situation is quite funny. When everyone is propaganda to the investor, to the media, they say, we have this amount of bicycles. When they report to the government, they have to share a totally different one because government some of the time do not want them to
report?
To deploy too much to a city.
I see.
And then the government collect data from 10 company, and then you add what they say to the media. Very different answers. Finally, so we work with some of the consulting companies. So they figure out a technology using Bluetooth. Because every single bicycle, they have a Bluetooth based. Their lock is Bluetooth based. And government deploy a lot of that beacon. So the beacon talk to the bicycle, and then they finally get the number. It's at the beginning, it's very hard for them to really get the data, and then technology plays a role.
I totally agree. Yeah.
But for this, you get exactly where the bikes are, right? For Bluetooth, you run a bicycle.
Someone just
how many bikes there are?
No, they pre-plan those beacons, so they plan every. Maybe 1 kilometer.
Lamppost is a very good thing. Yeah.
And also, it's the interesting technology is that every single bicycle they have a protocol. When your phone, their app talking to their bicycle, there's a certain type of protocol. So the beacon they deployed knows how to identify which brand it is, and then finally they get a very accurate total amount of bicycles. The distributions, and now they can manage it in a very good way. So the region you cannot deploy too much. If you deploy too much, you have 4 hours, you need to remove them. Everything now operates quite smooth.
In this case, it's similar in some ways. The bicycle operators probably don't want the government to know too much, right? There's a little bit of conflict of interest there, right? They want to run a business, right? In today's world, most corporates They try not to over disclose, that emitting carbon and stuff like that, for fearing that the government will tax them. So we're in that awkward situation, right? But regardless, if there's a way someone can share or the data to regulators, to governments, it will really help make because in the same, right? In that case, the China government was actually able to manage the situation well, right? So we have to provide the data.
So for the bicycle case, there's another complication in China.
Okay.
I have some friends in the bicycle industry. Is that obviously you want to know how many bicycles are produced and shipped, right? You go to the source, right? Go to the manufacturer and say that, okay, this guy's ordered how many bicycles and it's shipped to which city. But there's one challenge is that the local government of the bicycle manufacturing towns and the government of where the bicycle actually are deployed, they have very different incentives. That's true. So those hosting like the bicycle manufacturing plants, they care about local employment, they care about tax, they care about this.
Correct.
So for them, it's like as many bicycles as possible.
Exactly. So in political science or policy making, right, really have to understand. I say it's human behavior, right? But it's really alignment of interest, right? Alignment of interest. Once you get that done, more an art than a science. Now I'm supposed to talk about a lot about science and carbon accounting, right? But I keep going back to that point because it's an adoption problem. Right? The science is there. We have the technology. We have the science, the methodology. We have the right standards. We have,
It's interesting. It's three of us studying computer science in university, and now we're talking about human beings. Okay. Any final thoughts, right?
I think the topic today is carbon accounting, right? And I think maybe I can give your audience a kind of 101, right? What is carbon accounting, right? In general, the idea is very straightforward. So you run a business, right? And then you have a number of business activities, right? And each of your business activity will translate to a carbon emission. So the way to calculate that is to take your business activity, multiply by what we call emission factor, and then you get your CO2e, carbon dioxide equivalent, right? Measured in tons or kilograms. So an example of that is that I have traveled, say, X number of kilometers using X liters of diesel. This is a very easy example, right? So I multiply that by the diesel emission factor, right? If I know the national number, fantastic. If I know the petroleum company that has refined the diesel, even better, right? If not, the UN body IPCC has a global standard for that. And then I multiply by that factor. Now I have your CO2e, right? So you do that for all your business processes, right? And eventually you get to a total number. And then we also put those numbers into three buckets: Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3, right? Scope 1 is your direct emission when you burn fuel and stuff like that. And you use a diesel generator, for example, right? Your corporate car or your refrigerant leaks and stuff like that. And then Scope 2 is your electricity, your utility, right? Anything that you buy, energy that you buy from utility. It could be heating, right? It could be electricity, right? And then Scope 3 is everything else, right? Stuff that you import from overseas. You lease a car, for example, you lease a machinery that you have no control over. Someone comes to service you, right? You produce a product and then you sell to someone else. This is a big thing for car manufacturers. You design a car and then your consumers are now driving the car burning diesel, for example, right? So that's your Scope 3 because you influence that as well. For banks, there's something called the finance emissions, which is Scope 3 category 15, which is a large part of what a bank's carbon emission is really not the buildings, the paper, or the credit cards they issue. It's really the money they lend out to. Who are you lending to, right? Are you lending to a solar farm manufacturer, infrastructure operator? Or are you lending to, say, a oil and gas company to open up or drill more oil wells, right? If you're lending to an oil and gas company that is trying to decarbonize, that's fine. That's not a problem, right? If you know the exact purpose, we call it project financing, right? If you know the exact project, that is fine, right? The category of company does not matter, right? So that's finance emission. And the UN, the IMF, they're now tracking down most banks, right? And they say, okay, who are you lending to?
So for me, first is I really appreciate what Sam has shared. So it's a very informative session for myself. So now I know that we are actually a Scope 1 provider. So we help the companies who has the need to optimize their logistics, their deliveries. If you have such need, you can come to me, and Sam will help me to prove that it's really efficient.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think every time I talk to both of you guys and get more and more clarity about the content, and there's obviously you guys know so much noise around that, and we do hope that the audience that you get some clarity here as well. And I do think that the two guests are open to any questions that you might have. Just feel free to reach out. I think that's it. Thank you for tuning in to the Impulso Podcast by Mountain Works. I hope you do like today's session and do follow, like, on forward. Yeah, and see you next time. Bye.